love heals, hatred does not. And so I thought, okay, my body created this. It's not like something came out of the blue and created cancer in my body. My body created this, and I am creating what's going on in my body. And so I just knew that I would have to love the cancer.
Welcome to Cancer Talks, a podcast sharing personal stories of transformation from people whose lives have been touched by cancer. My name is Cheryl Buck, and I will be guiding today's conversation. Our guest, Cristina Whitehawk, is the author of My Ticket to Ride, From Cancer to Flourishing. After her diagnosis, Cristina decided to love the cancer inside her. Hi, Cristina.
Hi, Cheryl.
How you doing?
I'm great. And you?
Fantastic.
Good.
Looking forward to our conversation today.
Me too.
Well, I thought, as we kind of usually do now, if you would tell me about your early life, like your childhood.
That was a long time ago, Cheryl.
Okay, just try to remember one or two things.
Born in Chicago.
There you go.
Moved to Phoenix, Arizona when I was 7 years old and have been living here ever since.
Wow. Do you have brothers and sisters?
Deceased. I'm the oldest. I'm the bossy older sister.
Oh, okay.
And my brothers have deceased. And married, had a couple kids. And here I am.
Yes. Fantastic. So you wrote in your first book, there was a title of one of the chapters that said, "The Straw That Broke Your Camel's Back." And so I thought we'll talk about Joshua and what happened in his life.
My youngest child was Joshua, and notice the past tense. And he died in May of 2013, so it was 8 years ago. And I wasn't feeling well after his death, and I just chalked it up to grief, deep, deep grief.
Yes.
And saw a homeopathic MD, and he was treating me, and I was starting to feel better. And I saw a healer in one of our suburbs named Annette, and she was working on me, and she says, "I feel a lump in my abdomen, lower abdomen area." And she's feeling it energetically. She's not touching my body.
Yes.
And so I thought, well, I better go to the internist. And it took, first she said I was constipated, which wasn't true. Then she wanted me to get an x-ray, which isn't going to show anything. Then she did a vaginal sonogram, which didn't show anything. And finally, I just one night got up from my desk at 6 p.m., went down to the hospital 2 miles away, entered into the emergency department, and waited the 6 hours to find out after a CT scan that they found a mass and they thought it was cancer.
Wow.
So that's where a new chapter in my life begins.
Yes. I'm curious now that when it was 6 o'clock and you got up from your desk, were you in pain?
No.
Or you were just...
I was not in any pain. I had ascites, which I didn't know that I had it, other than I just thought, well, I'm getting old and out of shape, and I've got a big belly, and let it go at that. And my daughter is a nurse, so I kept getting a lot of nudges from her. And I think I really listened to my intuition, and it was like, okay, you need to do this now.
Yeah.
And so I did.
Yeah.
And glad I did.
Yes. Yes.
Ovarian cancer is one of the cancers that has no real external signs. And so if Annette had not noticed the lump in my body, I'm pretty sure I'd be dead now. Because it was third stage, what do they call it? Stage 3C. HG, which means it's high grade.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm grateful to be on Earth.
And I'm grateful that you're here.
Thank you.
Yes. I did not know that there were no external signs for ovarian
Not
cancer.
really. You get
Interesting.
bloated, but females bloat,
Yes.
you know.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. And so, with your various female processes, and you get low energy. Well, we all get low energy. You might get more frequency of urination, which I didn't notice anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I look at, I'm supposed to still be here.
Yes.
That part of me, that the straw that broke my camel's back, is my son's death, and I know that part of me wanted to go with him.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And as I wrote later on in the book, that I felt the cancer was a way I could create that, in
Mm-hmm.
the sense of, okay, create cancer and you'll die and you'll be with him.
Yes.
However, a greater part of me evidently wanted to stay. So here I am,
Yes.
grateful, and thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad you're here. So, you said at some point, I now don't know whether I read what you said or we've talked a few times. So, whether you said it to me on the phone, but when you got that diagnosis, when you were in the emergency room, you had this feeling of freedom and relief, and yet at the same time, you had a cancer diagnosis.
Yeah. I had been putting off career changes
Mm-hmm.
because I supposedly didn't know what to do. And if I was walking my own talk, I would have just started doing something knowing it would take me somewhere. But I got caught up in that mentality, or I let myself get caught up in that mentality of, I don't know what to do, so therefore I won't do anything, and I'll continue trying to make something that doesn't want to work anymore work.
Right.
And my son was working for me, so we had a lovely work relationship. And so looking back on that, I can see where that all played in, about not wanting to make any changes. And
Yes. Yeah.
change is inevitable in our lives,
Mm-hmm.
And so that was what the relief was, as I felt my career, literally felt it move out of my body while the doctor was standing next to me in the emergency department giving me that diagnosis. And I wrote in the book, it was orange, and I don't see stuff like that, but it was more my internal vision, and it was gone, and I felt really relieved. And yet, like you said, I've got a cancer diagnosis. How can you feel relieved? And
Right.
but I did.
Yeah. Wow. And you knew that it was your career that was leaving your body, basically.
Radically changing.
Yes.
I didn't
Yes.
know. I had already written a book. It's now been, I think, about 9 or 10 years ago. And that was it. I was done. And little did I know, and at the diagnosis, I didn't know I'd be writing my book and the companion workbook to it. And now I'm writing a book on my process after Joshua died. And so if you had asked me that 8 or 9 years ago, I'd have thought you were crazy.
Right.
So change is a good thing if you relinquish your grasp on not wanting to change.
Right. Yes.
Easier said than done.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. So then you had this cancer diagnosis, and I'm assuming basically no career. I'm assuming that you just stopped
Correct.
so that you could deal with the cancer.
Correct.
Yeah. And then at some point, as you were dealing with the cancer, and I don't know when that was, if it was in the beginning or further down the road, you decided to love your cancer. Can you tell me about that? Not everybody does that. So,
Yes. And a lot of people look at me like, I'm crazy. I knew, and I teach this, and I was walking my talk again and talking the walk, etc. Love heals.
Mhm.
Hatred does not. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to, my body created this. It's not like something came out of the blue and created cancer in my body. My body created this, and I am creating what's going on in my body. And so I just knew that I would have to love the cancer. And so I wrote in the book about how I would do visualizations. The doctor wanted to do immediate surgery.
Mm.
And I asked for 2 weeks because I had to shut down all my business stuff and get that lined up before I could go. So I was doing a lot of visualization while I was doing that. And it was, okay, well, let's love this cancer. And one of the things I wrote in the book was that, okay, I don't know if it's metastasized anywhere else in my body. If it has, let's put it in pretty little boxes with bows on it. And so I would visualize that. And so when the surgery was taken care of, there was absolutely nothing other than the places where the surgeon removed the cancer from organs and things like that, and a hysterectomy. Nothing had gotten into my lymph nodes, nothing had gotten into my bowels.
Hmm.
So, I was grateful for those pretty little packages I gave him.
Yes.
And I just kept loving the cancer because I wanted to know, well, why am I creating this? Why am I creating this huge change in my life? And I was curious. I didn't want to go into, oh my, poor me, what am I going to do? And I'll be suffering. Well, yeah, I suffered. Chemo isn't a pretty little thing.
Mm.
And yet, cancer, teach me. Show me what you want me to know.
Hmm.
So that's why I love the cancer. And now in July, I will be 7 years NED, no evidence of disease.
Hmm.
I've been on no maintenance medications. I've had no recurrences.
Wow, that's fantastic. How did you come up with cancer is my teacher? Like, where did that come from?
Everything in our life is our teacher.
Right. So, are you saying you already knew that before you had cancer? That everything, I totally agree that everything in our
Yeah,
life,
I do
the
have
good, the
that.
bad, and the ugly. Yeah.
Right, right. And my approach to life, except when I was not wanting to deal with my career change, is to
Right.
embrace the change.
Yeah.
And so I wonder at deep, deep, deep levels. I don't think there'll ever be an answer, and that's okay. I didn't want to make that change because then maybe my son wouldn't be working for me, or his situation, he had had a liver transplant, would be a challenge. I think there's some part of me just didn't want to look at any of that.
Yeah.
And yet cancer, it was like, okay, cancer, you're here. Show me what you want me to know.
Yeah.
And that's true if you have a broken arm too. Yeah, it's an accident, but okay, what can I learn from this?
Yeah. So, what did you learn?
Oh, I was no longer in business with what I was doing before.
Mm-hmm.
I learned, I guess I'm a writer.
Uh-huh. Right. Yeah.
I had to go through, okay, now I'm an author, but am I a writer? There's a difference.
Yes.
And I learned that. When I go back and reread the book, it's like, who wrote that? Well, I wrote that. So it's just honoring that part of myself that wants to do that. I learned how to create more expansion in my life, in the sense of there's more I want to do and accomplish and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was talking earlier, working with some people in a group with conversations with Christina, cancer folks that are willing to look at a more expansive view of their life other than just being, poor me, I have cancer and I'm going to die. One of the things I wrote in the book is that the cancer statistics, if we look at them, they can be scary. However, most people don't die from cancer. Now, different cancers, I realize, are more susceptible to that than other cancers are.
Mm-hmm.
And with the ovarian cancer, and I didn't know this because I didn't look at the statistics, 75% of the women don't make it to year 5.
Mm.
So it's a pretty serious one.
Yes.
And it's like, and I didn't know that until after I started writing the book. I didn't know that that wasn't part of my healing process. My healing process was, what can I do? What can I learn from this? Show me what to do. And deeply connect with my higher inner self for guidance. And so that's what I've learned through cancer.
Yes, beautiful. The title of your first book is My Ticket to Ride from Cancer to Flourishing. And that it really is. I reread a couple of the chapters over the past week, and well, it's the kind of book I love. It's one of the kinds of books I love. You're so clear, and your message is so powerful, and it's not a message that people generally hear. So I highly recommend anyone with a cancer diagnosis. That's one of the best places to go.
Thank you.
So there are a couple of chapters in the book. One is titled Cancer is Facade. And I thought that would be really great to talk about the message that chapter, you shared with us. And then the other one is Cancer as an Ally.
Yeah, the facade is, as we talked a little bit earlier, there's always something behind our actions, our responses, and it's a need. Behind all of that is a need, and evidently I needed to either grow or leave the planet, one or the other, and I decided I wanted to grow. And so anything's a facade. Let's say if you have let's say a thyroid deficiency, what's my thyroid telling me? What do I need to know? And so I started looking at the facade behind it. So I wanted to get beyond the facade of what this is. I wanted to get beyond, yes, I had to go to chemo and I didn't feel well and I couldn't do anything and all of that. And one of the things that came out of that, and I write about in the book, is creating our strength by being vulnerable. And cancer folks, myself included, we always want to, and I'm talking about myself, even though I'm saying we, I've got it all. I've got it together. I know what I'm doing, and I don't need anybody. And well, chemo took care of that. And so, as my husband sat beside me holding the bowl while I threw up, that kind of thing. And so people that were so loving and caring, and I had to receive. So cancer kept me from the facade is, well, I don't need anything. I can take care of myself. And so getting behind that facade, that created the vulnerability, which meant I was really loved and still am, and receiving it. Cancer folks, and a lot of folks, not just cancer, are not big receivers. Give, 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 give. And I'm a giver.
Yep.
But we run the well dry.
Yes.
If we don't receive. So that's what the facade taught me, which flips over into, then that makes cancer my ally, because it taught me how to be an even bigger receiver. And just little things like, okay, as soon as I had heard about the Cancer Talks program, I wrote and asked you if I could send you a copy of my book, because I didn't know if, is that am I stepping on toes? I never had done that before. And you said, of course. And so that was a big thing on my part, to reach out and ask to have my needs met.
Yes.
And, that's a no-no. I give. I don't need to have my needs met. Well, of course I do.
I know the feeling.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And it's so much fun when our needs are met.
Yes. Way more fun.
Way more fun. Way more fun. So that's how it became Cancer as my ally. I'm not sure if I fully answered your question on that, but that's how it came about.
Yes. Well, in that chapter, Cancer as Ally, you quoted Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor. And I'm just going to read this, and then I'd love to hear what you have to say about this.
Okay.
So he says, perhaps it is not so much for us to find meaning in life as to give meaning to what life brings us.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wrote, I think you wrote this, the ultimate human freedom is how we decide to respond, not react to our life circumstances.
Okay. And so my previous training job, I was an educational kinesiology consultant and educator.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at the brain, the rear brain is about survival. So, and I would tell the students, okay, if your house is on fire, you don't say, well, where are the hot dogs? We're going to roast hot dogs. You get out, you know. The front
Yes.
brain is about responding. You make a choice, you know, that
Mm-hmm.
type of thing. And so, what Frankl was saying is if we're looking outside of ourselves, or my interpretation of what Frankl said, if we're
Mm-hmm.
looking outside of ourselves for, well, what's the meaning of my life? It'll be an unanswered question, and we'll keep doing things and running into things like cancer to
Mm-hmm.
say, well, hello, can you find the meaning of your life here? If I choose to take action, which I didn't choose to do with my career change, then you start having a response to life and you offer something to life, which gives you your direction and what you're doing in your life. And
Yes.
so it was a blessing that I didn't want to change my career because it enlightened me and fed me and enriched me for so many years. And yet I was ready to take the next step, and some part of me didn't want to take that next step.
Mm-hmm.
So I did, and here I am, and I'm grateful for all that I've created with this.
Yes. Yeah, that's beautiful. You know, I just from my point of view, I totally get why you didn't want to stop the work that you were doing because you were working with your son. And that just strikes a personal note for me. I can imagine what that was like for you. So,
Well, we had been, how do I want to say that, physically distanced from one another. And he was living in Jerusalem, and I missed him.
mm-hmm.
And he came back to Phoenix, which he did not like. He was born here, he died here, and had to regroup his life. And so we became closer. And I think, not that you can make up for those years when you weren't together. I mean, we would talk on the phone or something, but not physically present.
Right.
It was like, finally, I've got my son with me in my life physically.
Yes.
And it was a rough time. And yet, I'm a mother. You know, this is my kid. This is important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, then when I could finally, he was getting on his feet, and I could say, if you, he helped set up a website for me. He would make flyers for me. He would do a lot of techie things that I still don't know. And so I really appreciated how he helped me, and it gave him income to get himself ready to go. So I can see now, as I look back and talk to you about this, why I didn't want to make the career change.
Mm-hmm.
It would upset that apple cart.
Yes. Which was a wonderful apple cart.
It was, and he showed me that, let me show you how to upset the apple cart more. I'm going to die.
Oh gosh.
And so, and
Oh.
it's a blessing, and I feel it's a blessing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you read this part in the book where I immediately, as soon as I received the diagnoses, I started getting what I called miracle moment previews about I would
Yes.
be okay. And one was after a couple months of chemo, the doctor says, okay, I want to get a PT scan. I think you're fine now. And I thought, woohoo, I can be through with chemo. And so I had the PT scan, had it on I think it was a Thursday, and I asked the technology guy, I said, when would the results be ready? He says, Monday. Well, I know they push it out just in case to cover themselves, you know. Yet I wasn't concerned. I knew I was okay.
Yeah.
And then the next day, walking through the living room, I heard Joshua say, like, I swear he was sitting on the couch,
Okay.
everything's okay, Mom, don't worry.
Oh.
So, and it was true. But then the doctor said you have to have more chemo till July. I think this was February or March. And that was awful, but it was the just in case chemo.
Yeah.
And because I'm a person that does a lot of healthy eating and organics and things like this, I was a little bit surprised that I chose the chemo. It surprised me. And the doc said to me after the surgery, tumor debulking, removing of the omentum, hysterectomy, you have an 80, I think it was like 82 or some odd number, 83% of surviving this with chemo. And I made that decision right there lying in the hospital post surgery. And I surprised myself.
Yeah.
Because it's not a pleasant thing.
Yes. Well, I have not had the personal experience, but just reading when you did talk about your experience with chemo, that was enough for me.
Yeah.
I really got it.
It's sheer hell, you know. I think as human beings, we have we know how to deal with these things in ways that doesn't have to be chemo. However, when I say something like this, the world will come rolling down on my shoulders like, well, it's saving lives. Well, in one respect, there's side effects from it that I'm still experiencing.
Oh boy.
And I'm hoping that what I've written, what Cancer Talks does, that we can help change that paradigm and ways to look at it differently.
Yes.
It isn't a death
Sentence.
exclamation, a sentence in your life, And so evidently, what has cancer taught me? Well, here I am talking to people on Cancer Talk about all these things that if you had asked me that 8 years ago, I would have looked at you like you were nuts. So thank you, Cancer.
Yeah, there you go.
I keep thanking it.
Yes, right, exactly. There's one line in your book or a couple of, that's probably a paragraph or more, it might be a page, but you talk about, and I wanted to ask you this, like to kind of tell me what the difference is here, that you talked about the underlying feelings of grief and despair that you had, and probably to a certain extent you still do, that they were due to a pattern of unconnectedness, which you compared and said not disconnectedness. Could you tell me what the difference is or what you mean by that?
I could feel it, but I don't know if I can tell you that. It was the unconnectedness between Joshua and I, and maybe greater than that, I'm not sure. And it's like, even though we're physically present, maybe there was something that still wasn't connected in our lives. And as I write about this in my next book, Conscious Dying, Conscious Grieving, I still am not quite sure, Cheryl, what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it felt like, yes, this makes sense to me. We had a lot of unconnectedness in ways that maybe it was emotional. Maybe it was at the soul level. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, we had physical disconnection, yet we were finally back together again physically. And the unconnectedness was like maybe greater than I could realize. I think it's something that's far deeper than I realize. And I was grieving that. And maybe, for people that look at, maybe we've had other lifetimes or things, maybe it's from there. I don't know. but it was a real eye-opener for me. How do I heal this unconnectedness? And to me, that puts it back to the creative source that we are. We're in human form. We're unconnected from divine source and disconnected. So it's meaning we don't have the connection. Disconnected is, to me, more like I unplugged.
Yeah.
I turned off that light switch.
You had it, but then you
Yeah,
pulled the plug
but
on
we're
it.
still always connected, but I'm not tuned into it.
Yes. Yeah. That's great. I really appreciate that distinction. Thank you. Let's talk about your book that just went to the publisher. You just said the title, Conscious Dying, Conscious
Conscious
Grieving.
grieving, creating the change necessary to heal.
That's it.
And back we go again to change, the big C.
Yes.
Big C isn't cancer, it's change.
Right.
And one of the things I learned about the cancer, when I started feeling better, I got intuitively go online and join a cancer Facebook group. And I didn't want to do that. No, 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 I don't want to spend my time doing that. But I did because I knew I'd get, bugged again to do it. And I've learned that there are people that are totally in the victim role with cancer. And then those that, okay, I want to get on with my life. What do I do? And they take action. And it's not like the victims aren't taking action. It's like they are being told what to do and they follow through, which I did. And the other side of that, I took action about, okay, what is it I need to do beyond this? And I found the same thing when the grief thing started hitting. Okay, join a Facebook group. And I joined that group. And again, there's the people that, my husband died 50 years ago and I can't get on with my life. And then there's the ones that are, okay, this is very painful, it's difficult, it's challenging. How do I grow my life? And so for me, this book will be it's my journal that I wrote. It's a grief journal. But what did I do to get on with my life? And I was really writing that, not physically, but emotionally and mentally while I was going through the cancer.
Yeah.
And so that's where the grief piece comes from. And we
Yes.
all have grief in our lives.
Yes.
And it can cripple us
Yes.
if we let it.
Yes. Oh, I look forward to that one.
You'll be the first to know.
Okay, good.
Do I have permission to send you a copy, Cheryl?
Of course. Oh. So there's one more thing that I know that you're doing now, which is having, I'm not sure exactly how you define it, but it's called Conversations with Christina. And I'm planning to attend the next one and probably beyond because I love talking to you and I love your, I want to call it point of view, but that seems very narrow. It's just your
life
worldview.
focus.
Even.
A life focus. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, right. It's not even your worldview. It's beyond that. What did you just say?
A life focus.
A life focus.
I'm with you. I don't know what kind of what to call it. I used to do
Right.
conversations with Christina 25 years ago.
Oh, really?
And with doing the educational kinesiology. And the point of that is when you put something into your body through movement, you can set an intention, put it into your body through movement, and it heals things in your body, emotionally, let's say, or mentally, and you can move on a little easier. So I decided to start that as it's my community service. I don't charge for it. And I don't know. I can honestly tell you when it starts on May 27th this month. I have no idea. There is no agenda. And we get on and people will start talking about what's going on. And I think what I'm doing is applying some of the things in the companion workbook I wrote for my Ticket to Ride. It's Heart of Courage, Solutions for Undoing What Fear Created.
Mm-hmm.
And out of that came a class, a workshop series on Heart of Courage, Circle of Solutions, Life Masteries. And so I know I'm dropping little drops of that workshop into that to let people know, not to push the workshop, but to let people know here are some things you can use that might change your framework and make your life feel a little bit easier, better, more joyous, that type of thing.
Yes.
So I'm just as surprised as everybody else when I go on there. It's a Zoom piece. I think I've allowed it an hour and a half. Sometimes I think the first time was, I think we did about an hour and 15 minutes. And we'll see
Yeah.
what happens when we get on this week. So yeah, I look forward to having you there.
Yeah. Wonderful. I look forward to being there. Well, do you have any final things that you want to say, comments?
Open up your heart, listen to your heart, receive, allow yourself to be vulnerable. It may be painful, but in the long run, it enriches you.
I'm going to have to listen back to that one. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well, absolute pleasure to talk with you. And I think you are an inspiration to so many people.
Oh, thank you. And we're all an inspiration, except we don't allow ourselves to know that.
Very true.
And cancer has allowed me to know that. It's still a little, it's sort of like putting on a new pair of shoes, and it feels a little odd, and yet I get a lot of feedback in that direction. So I guess they're my shoes, and I'll continue to wear them. Thank you, Cheryl.
Oh, thank you. Fantastic. If you enjoyed this conversation, please leave a review in your podcast app. This podcast is a platform for anyone who has been touched by cancer. Go to cancertalks.com/mystory to join the conversation. If you are moved to donate, please visit patreon.com/cancertalks. This episode was produced by Claire DeLaslo and Rory Amenrud, original music and editing by Annie Mernigan, and a special thanks to our donors and volunteers. We couldn't do this without you.